When you are a man, sometimes you wear stretchy pants in your room. It's for fun.
Wheeze in the house.
Wheeze in the house. That's the official term we're going. Wheeze in the house.
Getting lit on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, you're not wrapped up
Jared
in. You're not wrapped up in a. You've got your electric blanket.
Yeah.
Sweet. So go plug in your electric blanket.
I pushed it down so that it's not completely wrapped around me, but
That's fair. What? Oh, hold on. I'm also wearing a hoodie. I should hood up like you. There it is.
it basically feels like I'm like sitting outside on a -10 day. There's just like a constant breeze in this basement.
Oh man, did you catch I sang a song that you should know a minute ago. I said, so go plug in your electric blanket. We can stay here. I don't know if that's exactly how it goes.
I'm gonna have to go with call a friend. I need an option because I don't know what that is.
It was Alkaline Trio. One of the
okay.
album. I don't know specifically which album it's off of, but it's one that we've covered in the past. So
well, we covered a lot of them.
we did. We did 4, I think, right? Is that what we stopped at?
Which is quite a few albums for a band.
It is, and I could have kept going. Like I was open to it, but we stopped at 4 because that's just what we do. And now we've moved on to different things. We're going to talk about different things today. I just noticed my light is falling down above me, so hopefully it doesn't just like come dropping into frame. Yeah, it's actually it's funny because it's currently duct taped to a shelf above me.
Nice.
So anyway, yeah, we're I don't know if I got through the intro. Welcome to Growing Up Punk, the podcast about punk rock and all of its friends. My name is David. My friend is Aaron. Hello.
Hey, what's up? Welcome.
I like how we like save the greeting for after we've been talking for a few minutes. Like that's not how you do things.
BS to get through it, you know.
That's fair, but I like to think that I'm just going to approach all conversations from here on out where I'm going to talk to someone for like 4 or 5 minutes and then be like, oh, by the way, hi.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that happens enough.
That's fair. So we're continuing our label series. Of course, if you missed it, we've so far covered Solid State Records, and our last 2 episodes were Victory Records. If you're just jumping in here because you're like, man, I like Fat Records, and that's how you heard about it. We're going through some of our favorite labels from, I guess, back in the day is how we can word it, even though not all of the releases are from back in the day. But anyway, just record labels that we've come to love over the years. And what we're doing is we have an episode where Aaron and I share our 5 favorite releases from that label. And then it gets followed up with an interview with an artist who was on the label or is on the label, depending on how that works out, sharing their 5 favorite records from the label as well. So this episode is Fat Records. It's where we're at, which is, do you remember the first time you heard about Fat Records and where that, like what led you to that?
Yeah, this was, I've mentioned this before on some episodes about when my brother went to the city and came back with Pennywise and Face to Face. And he also came back with Life in the Fat Lane, which was one of the classic Fat Records samplers. The samplers were so big, should I say, were so fat back in the day.
But
it was, and lots of bands that stood out to me. Some of those might even make on this list today. I can't remember exactly who was on that, but I think there was at least one band that was represented, or album that I'm going to pick, that was on that album. And
sweet.
Yeah, and just, like we mentioned lots of times, we were soaking it up back then and just loving everything we could get our hands on. And I loved a lot of it on there and have kept up with a lot of those bands ever since.
Yeah, I don't remember what my introduction to Fat Records would have been.
So I just thought, go ahead. I'll share another memory after.
Okay, so yeah, because for me, I'm trying to think. The first Fat band I can remember kind of seeking out would have been Good Riddance. And it was kind of by accident, not intentional anyway. I saw this band play at an outdoor kind of concert show thing, festival, I suppose. And they played like they were a crappy band, but they covered Fertile Fields. And I had no idea what it was, but the song just got stuck in my head. And so I kind of had to search it out. And I'm sure I shared this story when we covered Good Riddance a number of episodes ago, quite a ways ago back. But I think like my cousin had it or something, and this song comes on, and I'm like, dang, this is that song I was looking for. And so that's the first time I can remember hearing a Fat band. And then getting probably bought that record and then was like, Fat Records. Okay. Yeah. I'm familiar. Oh, Fat Mike. Yeah. Okay. Kind of like opening the door that way. That's the first memory I can have specifically listening to a Fat band anyway. But you had another memory you wanted to share?
Yeah, sorry. It was so I went to a middle school that was just grade 7 and 8, so I broke up the elementary and high school. I was
So
in
did
grade
I.
7, and there was a couple of skater kids in
Yeah.
grade 8, and the one guy had a No Effects hoodie because I remember thinking like,
Oh yeah.
what is
Nofx, yeah.
Nofx? And then on the back, it had their classic logo.
Yeah.
And I just always remember thinking like, what is Fat Wreck Chords? Like I never pieced it together that it was records.
Yeah.
But I can still picture myself in the hallway seeing that and thinking like, oh, that's kind of I think that was the year I got my first piece of band merch, a value pack shirt.
Mm.
And then I remember seeing that and thinking like, okay, like the kind of skater kids. He also had a Rage Against the Machine hoodie, which I didn't know until years later what that is. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it had the little like what's the album cover was like that kind of little fat kid on the front.
Evil. Well, he's not fat, but Evil Empire.
Okay,
I have that.
Yeah. What am I?
It's funny. I took down. Well, you can see this, and obviously anyone who's watching. I changed the decorations behind me on my wall, and I had a copy of that somewhere. Evil Empire. I was going to point it out, but they're all literally like those CD booklets that were on the wall. They're just scattered all over the place right now because I like did it last minute. You're like, are you going to be ready for 9? And I'm like, oh, a little after because I was busy decorating and I didn't finish. There's other things I'm going to change in here, but it's That's all cool. So nice and black and white now. Anyway,
I guess that was the first introduction. However, it didn't actually introduce me to the label. It just introduced me to maybe the idea of it. Or
right.
But then when I saw that sampler and saw in the back, it was kind of like, oh, like that's what that is. And there's a few pieces to the puzzle there, but
anyways. No, that's awesome. Because I mean, I'm sure I would have like they had so many samplers too, right? Like Life in the Fat Lane, short music for short people. That was a Fat Wreck?
Yeah.
And then because then didn't they do like short music for fat people? Did they do that? I don't know. There were so many of them. Yeah. And like I had friends who had a bunch of them. I don't know that I ever actually owned any of those, but definitely listened to them just, in friends' cars and whatever. But so they became a label that once you kind of knew who like that they were there, you knew for the like at least for the most part that the bands were all going to be pretty good, right? Like and I think that's the case with a lot of the labels that we're looking at, and that's sort of obviously what makes them kind of have the longevity that they've had, is that you knew when something had a Fat logo on it, you're like, oh yeah, okay. There was a reason that there was a phrase, they had that Fat sound, that Fat record sound, right? Like obviously not all the bands sound the same, but when we looked at say like Victory Records recently, and then some of the labels that we're going to look at coming up, Fat Wreck really kind of like stuck to more of a consistent sound over the years than a lot of their contemporaries did, I think. And that's cool. That's pretty cool. So why don't we get into our top 5?
Let's do it.
We'll go back and forth like we've done in the past. But what was your number 5?
Yes, I just want to reiterate what.
Fine, I'm trying to get to the list, and you're just.
Well, I feel like sometimes, like I've said lots, there needs to almost be like, what's the word? Not a proclamation. Like a warning. I can't think of the word. Anyways, where like we'll often say like we're not saying these are the best
Oh,
records
yeah.
or whatever. What's the word I'm looking for?
It's not a definitive like top 5. Like we're just literally
Yeah,
these are because here's the thing about our lists. We also kind of did a little bit of picking so that we kind of covered a little bit more where we may have had some of the same records on here. We're like, well, since you're talking about this record, then I can bring this one up because, it'll give me an opportunity still to say something about that. And I think they're mainly just records that have really, I guess, stuck with us personally that we connected to.
yeah,
When we heard them. So yeah, like we're not out here being like, yo, if you don't agree with our top 5 lists, you're an idiot. Like that's not what's happening at all. In fact, I can guarantee you that nobody is going to agree with our top 5 list. They might agree with some of the picks that make it, but there's no way they're going to be like, yep, that's the one. And as in with episodes in the past, we each, when we're going through our list, we can only pick one release per band. Now we both have a couple bands that end up on both of our lists,
yeah,
but I can't make a top 5 that's all Good Riddance, for instance, right? Like
right.
or all Propaganda or whatever, like different bands on Fat. We can only pick one from those bands. So yeah, let's get into your top 5.
Yeah, so
Unless you want to jump back again.
no, I do have one. So I
Yes.
always have all these random things, but
That's
I
fine.
do want to say a lot of the bands that we're going to share about, we have covered before, even talked about these albums.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you hear an album that's like, oh yeah, I love that album, then go back and check out if we have an episode on it. Because
there's a chance we do for sure.
Yeah. So we have talked about this band briefly, but not this specific album, and that is Hard Rock Bottom from No Use for a Name. So when we talked about this band previously, it was kind of, I was a fan of them. You didn't know them as much, kind of found it a bit harder to get into. And I will say with No Use for a Name, so I was just briefly listening to this record here after I put the kids to bed tonight. And, it definitely, it's not the craziest music or, even thinking about some of the other bands on Fat that, were either super political or, kind of had a really specific thing to them. No Use for a Name never really had that, other than, Tony Sly was a really unique songwriter, really gifted with melodies and lyrics. And, and that's kind of stood out for me. So this album, the last one we talked about was More Betterness. This is the follow-up to it, which is not that far off from More Betterness. I do think the songs are a bit better and progressed a little bit, but still kind of in that, melodic kind of skate punk sound. And there's just something about this album that when I listen to it, it just makes me happy. It's easy to listen to. It can be background music, or it can be, the music that you are focusing on, which is kind of a weird thing. I don't know if I've really thought about that a lot. There's some albums that, at least for me, I'll pick when I don't really have to pay attention, and there's some that I pick when I really want to pay attention. I feel like for me, No Use for a Name and this album can kind of go either way. And that comes to mind because I used to go and shoot pool with a buddy at his parents' house years ago, and he had all of his vinyls there, and we would often put on No Use for a Name albums. And so it was always kind of in the background as we were playing pool and talking and joking around. But it was just kind of a fun band, fun album to put on. It's an easy punk album to listen to, and I just think there's a lot of really good songs. For some reason, this album always kind of sticks out to me from their discography.
Yeah, like if you go back to the episode that we did that you referred to, that was No Use for a Name, and the Swellers is specifically who we talked about. And I can remember saying with More Betterness that it just felt, I forget how I described it. I feel like I probably used the word boring at some point in time. There were parts on that record where it was a struggle to listen to, but we texted a while back after that episode. I had gone and listened specifically to this record, Hard Rock Bottom, and I was like, oh, I like this a lot more than More Betterness. I can't pinpoint exactly what it is. I haven't listened to it enough times, but I know when I'd put it on that first time, I was like, okay, this feels definitely different than More Betterness. But I came to a conclusion with No Use for a Name. At least my experience with that band still is mainly just those 2 records. Like I've heard other, bits and pieces here and there from them from other albums, but like as far as listening to a record from start to finish, those 2 are the only ones that I've really done that with. And I came to the conclusion that they seem to like do this thing where there's always one song on the record that I just really can't stand. And so I think on More Betterness, I think it was a Pogues cover, maybe,
Yeah.
which is like the Christmas.
Right.
I can't remember what it's called
Yeah.
right now.
What was the one off of this one? As I was listening through tonight, I was trying to think which is the one that.
Yeah,
that David's not a fan of.
I gotta look it up. Hold on. Let's see if I can Hard Rock Bottom. I didn't have this open, so I got to open it up. I'm gonna say, it's This Is a Rebel Song, which is a cover again. They just do like such terrible covers. Like it's a cover of a Sinead O'Connor song, and so it has like the female vocals on it.
Okay.
And I just can't because then on More Betterness, it was, give me a track listing here.
Is it like that Christmas song or whatever?
Fairy Tale of New York.
Oh, right, yeah.
Which I believe was he Pogues? I sound like an idiot now because I'm the Pogues. Okay. I just was second guessing myself. But like their covers, I'm not there because they get like kind of folky, which I mean that Pogues song, I feel like they stuck pretty close to the original if I recall anyway. And I just find it weird. We're talking about More Betterness now for a second, but I just find it weird to put a Christmas song in the middle of, or what is traditionally kind of like has a very Christmas vibe to it in the middle of a non-Christmas album. It just like throws me right off. But I do like Hard Rock Bottom more than More Betterness. But and I love, like, that's what I can appreciate Tony Sly's songwriting, which is something that I love being able to go in with that band. They might not have something instrumentally that hits me over the head right away, but he's definitely a songwriter for me anyways, that you can like sit down and just kind of look at what he does and, kind of have that appreciation grow, I think, over time. But yeah, good pick. My number 5, is not No Use for a Name. It's actually Mad Caddy's Rock the Plank. And there may be a lot of people that look at that pick and go, well, okay, like, sure, I guess Mad Caddies could make the list, but why that record necessarily? Because I think they've got some other ones that maybe people attach themselves to a little more. But for me, this was the Mad Caddies record that I knew the best and really liked. And I was looking at a number of my picks, or at least like albums that were in the running for what I picked in my top 5. And a lot of them came out at this time, like that, like 2001, 2002, 2000, somewhere, like in those couple of years, because that's when I was really diving into Fat Records. And it was just, well, what's the latest from this band? What's the latest from this band? And so this record is the one that really kind of drew me in with Mad Caddies. And I've always it's funny because they obviously, as a ska band, ska core band, it's always thrown me off a little bit when you get into some of their songs. Like, what do they got? They had was it Booze Cruise? No, they have a few songs, like one's like a polka sort of song, and another's like a shanty sort of like pirate sing along, and like there's some weird ones on there. But at the same point, like Weird Beard, I think, is the pirate sing along song, and maybe All American Badass, I think, is the last song. It's like a kind of like a polka sort of thing that they do, but like the choruses are just straight up like punk rock. It's good stuff. But yeah, this band, one of my favorite things about this band is a memory tied to them. I don't remember the first time I heard their name. I don't remember why I bought the record. Like, I think I probably just bought it because A, I'd heard the name Mad Caddies, and B, it was, a Fat Wreck release. So I was like, all right, let's get it. But I went to see them and they were touring this record. And I'm trying to remember if they were opening, because I feel like I saw them open for either Good Riddance or Rise Against. And I feel like if it was at this time, it was probably Good Riddance. But anyway, I wonder if I can find info on that tour. But I went and saw them like the day after I got my wisdom teeth pulled, or maybe they were headlining. It's possible that they were headlining, and another opening band, like the opening band was one I'd seen open for Good Riddance to Rise Against. They all blend together, those shows. But yeah, I went to see them the day after I got my wisdom teeth pulled, which was an interesting choice for me to make. But
an unwise choice.
An unwise choice for me to make. But I mean, I had my tickets, and and then I went to the dentist, and they're like, "Oh, your wisdom teeth are coming in. We got to get these things out of here." And so, there wasn't much I could do, but I went, and I was probably pretty high on some painkillers and milkshakes, because that's
why you liked it so much.
Yeah, it was such a great time. But yeah, no, Mad Caddies Rock the Plank. It's forever. Like, as soon as it comes on, they got some super catchy songs on there. I don't know, like, were you ever into Mad Caddies? I brought this record up when we did way back in our past
favorite
life.
Ska.
Yeah, we did an episode on ska albums, and I believe this was probably my number one album for ska, because I'm not huge on ska. And I like that this record isn't very ska. Like, in fact, the genre listing on Wikipedia is just punk rock, pop punk. Like, they don't even mention ska. There's definitely horns in there, but it's, they don't do, I don't know if there's any song on this record where they do like the upbeat guitar.
Right.
It's just all basically horns over top of pop punk rock songs. And obviously a polka song and a sea shanty song, but it's all really good. But were you into them at all?
Yeah, you know what? I can picture, or I can hear a song in my head right now that I think is them from one of those samplers.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, maybe just at that time, I never really got into it. I really don't know a whole lot about this band. They did release a covers EP not too long ago that had some cool songs on it.
Yeah, I feel like more recently, like, they've kind of gone that route where they're doing like the ska reggae stuff, if I recall. I could be wrong. It's been a while since I really followed them, but yeah, I feel like I remember this covers EP. Was it more reggae?
Yeah. There was a Green Day song in it that was kind of cool.
Was it She? I feel like it was
I think so.
Yeah. I listened to it, but I was not so into it. I was excited, and I was like, oh yeah, they're not really doing that sound that I really loved anymore. But that's cool. That's fine.
Yeah. Overall, I really don't know a whole lot of their music, but
Yeah.
I do want to go back. Well, I think I listened to this one when we talked about that, and I liked it. I'll have to go back again because it's kind of blanking on it, but
It's a good one. It's like I said, I'm not big on ska in general, which we would have discussed probably quite in depth when we did our ska episode. But this record is one because it's basically a punk record with horns on it, right?
Yeah,
like,
which I like. So
it's real good. So what's your number 4?
Number 4 is the first semi-actual Fat Records album I got, and I say that because it was the first album that I got burned from a friend. So it's the first album I got, but not actually
purchased.
So, I was working at McDonald's, maybe like grade 9, maybe 10 when this
Slinging
came out.
them Big Macs.
Yeah, and there was a guy there. There was a select few guys that had a good computer and a CD burner. Were selling burned CDs for $10 a piece, which I thought was amazing because that was like half price of what CDs were.
Yeah.
And so anyways, the first one I asked him to do was Strung Out's Twisted by Design.
Nice.
I don't remember why it was this one, maybe just because it was one I couldn't find in any stores or whatever at that time. But I just loved the kind of the metallic mix that they added to punk. It was a lot more riffy than a lot of the other punk bands that I had gotten into at the time were. And there's just something that kind of stood out. It was a little bit more aggressive and really, really good drums, fast drumming and fills, and so it's not necessarily my favorite Strung Out album or their best. There's a few others that I really love, but this one I just had to pick because it just I can still picture myself at McDonald's after shift giving this guy $10 to get this CD and just being so stoked to have more songs than just the samplers or whatever. And it's one I've gone back to, and I got to see them. I think it was for the 20th anniversary a few years ago. They came to Regina here, and and they played that CD from front to back, and so that just kind of helps solidify, like, okay, I've been listening to this album for 20 years, and I'm finally getting them seeing them play front to back. I'd seen them play live before, but
Yeah.
not play the whole album. The only bummer about that is their original drummer wasn't with them anymore, and so they had a different guy drumming. I did get to see them with their original drummer, but it would have been cool to see them with Jordan playing drums. But
Right.
anyways, yeah, just an album that I go back to lots and just brings back lots of memories.
Yeah, Strung Out. There, I think I sent you a text message because I went through like the albums anyway that you had picked that I hadn't really listened to, and they've always been a band because I think I compared them kind of to like metalcore in the sense of not saying they're a metalcore band, but just where my ear just kind of fatigues pretty quick.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not sure. Like I wouldn't say to the same extent as, some metalcore bands that are out there by any means, but I just I've never been into, we've debated at length the value of guitar solos. And so like I just don't like when they bust out their guitar solos. I'm always like, all right, cool. It just sort of it loses me a little bit, which I don't know why, because there are specific guitar solos that I really like, but the kind of like I guess metal side of like punk that they were like, or the metal they were infusing into their punk just kind of lost me a little bit outside of some songs here or there. But they've always been a band that I've wanted to get into because everyone talks about them, right? Like they're like one of those I guess legacy bands you could say that is still going, and from what I can tell still putting out records that their fans enjoy. Because I know they released, was it last year they released a record or 2 years ago?
No, I think it was last year.
Yeah.
2019, I think.
Okay, so that's
I guess not last year.
So it wasn't in contention for the episode we just released at the end of December.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I can appreciate them. They are some sick guitar players for sure.
Yeah, on this album is quite riffy. Like I think this was kind of like not necessarily their peak, but when they were really into, having the shreddy riffs, and they do have albums later on that, I mean, it's always guitar heavy, but not necessarily that extreme where it's so hard to listen to. So I can definitely see how, it might get a little hard to kind of pick one song to the next one. There's so many different parts to it or whatever. But I do feel like they, at least for me, there was enough songs in this album that the riffs are memorable enough and catchy. It's not so technical that it, goes on for minutes and minutes like, power metal or whatever. So anyway.
No, for sure. My number 4, I was just looking. So Mad Caddies, because I was mentioning a bunch of these albums released around the same time. So Mad Caddies was released on April 10th, 2001, Rock the Plank. My number 4 album was released April 24th, 2001. So a whole 2 weeks later, that would be the debut record, at least as far as I know, debut first on Fat for sure. I mean, maybe they had something out independently before that, but from Rise Against, The Unraveling, this record, I don't know what, because it's got terrible artwork, like one of the worst covers in the history of punk. Like I'm looking at it right now and I'm like, what is it even supposed to be?
A robot or something?
Like a robot or an alien holding its hand? I don't know. It's really bad though. I shouldn't say like that. I feel bad saying that because someone designed that. But anyway, so yeah, this record, I don't know. It may have just been a purchase. Like maybe I heard them on a sampler, or maybe I just went with it because, I was like, oh, it's a Fat Records band. They definitely fit in that Fat sound, especially early on. And I recently went back to this. I hadn't listened to it in a while, and I went back to it and I was like, man, every song on this record still is really good. And they became a band, like we did an episode on some of their kind of later albums, and they became a band that I sort of lost interest in. And Tim's vocals kind of get on my nerves sometimes when they like really got into like the really well produced, more radio friendly records. I don't know if he changed something in his voice that how he was singing, or if maybe it was just that he was singing more and like yelling or screaming less, and so his vocals started to kind of grate on me a little bit. But this record, it's such a good like skate punk hardcore melodic hardcore record. Like maybe it has a few too many songs, like if you wanted to complain about anything on it, like I'm just trying to track list, there's 16 songs on it, which is, again, that's like, they're definitely not the only band that ever did that, but it kind of feels a little bit like you get to the point where some of the stuff kind of starts bleeding together a little bit. But it's such a good record still, like going through. It's only 36 minutes long, but and with Rise Against, so I saw them touring this record, and they played a venue called the Warehouse in Calgary, which again, like that's where I saw like Mad Caddies and Good Riddance. That's why I'm like, I feel like some of those were at the same show. But so maybe Rise Against opened for Mad Caddies. Maybe that's what it was. I don't remember, because it would have been around this time, and I feel like Rise Against was just kind of like would have been the lesser of the two on the bill there.
Yeah.
But I can remember like going to that show, and it was so good. And then I saw them at Warp Tour. It's just so funny to like think about this band, because eventually they became a huge band, right? Like they were all over the radio. And like did they play like arenas? Like I feel like they played some pretty big. They got out of the clubs.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so then like to see them play Warp Tour on a side stage where there was like maybe 60 people, like blows my mind a little bit. But like that was, I went and saw them there too, in Warp Tour. That was probably 2002 or 3 maybe. But yeah, no, it was this band. I look back fondly on this record. The song Ever Changing specifically is like one that has, since the first time I heard it, has been just a song that I've loved. And it's buried real deep in the album at track number 11. Like I'm always like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Oh, are we? No, we're not there yet. Okay. Oh, now we're there. Like it's such a good song. But yeah, what was your number 3?
Yeah, so just to briefly touch on, well, I guess, yeah, good segue, because my number 3 is also Rise Against. And I picked the follow-up to The Unraveling. So the Unraveling is really good, a really good debut album for a new band. But to me, Revolutions Per Minute, really kind of solidified them as, or started to solidify them as a band. The songs were kind of a lot more cohesive and put together, and it was more polished. I don't know if this is the first one that they did at the Blasting Room. I'm not sure if they did the Unraveling there or not, but
I can look while you talk.
Yeah, it had just a great sound to it. I know this one a lot more than the Unraveling. I listened to this one a lot more. I might have even heard this one before the Unraveling. I can't remember exactly, but we talked about Revolutions Per Minute on our Rise Against episode, so you can go back and listen to some more thoughts on that. But
so
I don't know.
I was just real quick. It wasn't at the Blasting Room.
Okay.
I'm just looking.
Yeah, so I feel like they probably toured a lot on the Unraveling, and just became better songwriters and musicians, and just overall such a good album. Again, maybe not necessarily the best Rise Against album, but this is one that, I still know what CD book I have it in. The album cover stands out to me. And as soon as that first song starts, it's just like, okay, like I'm ready for this album.
I would make an argument that it, like, even though I just picked the Unraveling, I think you could make a solid argument that it is the best Rise Against record. Like for me, this was the last one that I was really into. And I did debate picking this one. We went, as we were texting back and forth, I was like, okay, well, you got this record, so I'm gonna go with the Unraveling, because I like they're kind of both, pretty even for myself. This one, the thing I think appreciate about it is, you mentioned like it's more polished and kind of cohesive. I do like that they seem to kind of play with dynamics a little more at different parts on this record. Having said that, my favorite song on the Unraveling being Ever Changing. It's kind of like, even though they don't introduce any clean tones in that song, it definitely starts off a little more mellow before they kind of like get into it. But but I just feel like on revolutions per minute, they definitely expand that a little more, like not being afraid to kind of bring things down a little bit and play with their
Yeah.
song structures a little bit. It is like when this record came out, I listened to it so much. But again, like that was the same thing with the Unraveling for me, as I listened to that record a ton when it came out. Because I was huge into this band. I can see how they got big. It also surprises me, at the same time, that they got as big as they did. When you like look at where they started, as like a melodic hardcore skate punk sort of
Yeah.
band, and then like for them to be all over, like not even just like new like alternative rock radio, but like on rock radio, like
Yeah.
blew my mind a little bit. But
Yeah, especially, with Tim's kind of gruffer vocals,
yeah,
and they're not really like a pretty boy band, or didn't really have that like one guy that, you know, kind of stole the show, so to speak, or
mhm.
was the photogenic guy. And so I mean, yeah, it's cool to see a band that put out at least four, well, I don't want to say four good records, four albums that I really liked, or four kind of still kind of true to their melodic hardcore punk
Yeah.
sound before they kind of started waning a bit. Yeah, it's cool to see them get that exposure. I didn't like those records as much, but it doesn't mean it's undeserved by any means.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and like that's what I think is interesting about some of those records, is that they didn't just completely abandon that sound when they were releasing records that started getting on radio. It wasn't like that sound was just no longer a part of who they were,
Yeah.
right? Like, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, no, those first two records, like lights out good. That's all I got to say about it. Lights out good. But my number 3, I think so far as we've done these episodes, I can't speak to the Solid State episodes. So, but like with Victory, and even like with Todd and his list, we've had a Canadian band make every list so far, and I'm going to keep that streak alive because I'm going to pick Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes by Propaganda. And so this record was my introduction to Propaganda. By the way, it came out only a month and a bit before those other two, because it was February 6th, 2001. The spring and winter of 2001 was
Yeah, killer year.
fantastic. Yeah, apparently.
Hitting puberty, ready to rage.
Yeah, man, that would have been I guess I would have been in grade 10. No, sorry, grade 11 for me. Well, technically grade 10 because I failed
Late
grade
bloomer,
10.
it's okay.
What's that?
The late bloomer, it's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. But I failed grade 10, man. And then so
Yeah, why you gotta be such a downer?
well, so you want to hear a story?
Yeah.
So I went to high school, right? And I went to high school just to hang out with friends, but I also tried to take like all like the highest level classes I could. So that didn't really like mix for me, because I'm like, I would say like some things come pretty naturally to me, but if I'm not putting effort in, I'm going to get lost, right? And
Yeah.
so I ended up failing math and science in grade 10, which the way it worked is you got credits, right, for classes you passed, and to be eligible, quote unquote, for grade 11, you had to have X amount of credits. But what they did was I failed math with a good enough grade that I was able to go on to grade 11 math, but like a step down. So it was like
Okay.
I took math 10. I don't know what it was in Saskatchewan, how it worked. And then instead of taking math 20 in grade 11, I took math 23, was like the step down or whatever. And if I passed that, they then would give me credits for math 10, right? Or math 13, technically. So in my yearbook, I realize is a really dumb story. In like my high school yearbooks, I was in grade 10, and then I failed those classes. So the next year, credit wise, I was in grade 10 again. And then for the next year, because I finished that class and got the credits for it, I was then in grade 12. So I
Wow.
failed grade 10, but I skipped grade 11. Anyway, all that to say, the spring and winter of 2001, when I was redoing grade 10 to skip grade 11, there were some good Fat Record albums that came out, and one of those was Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes by Propaganda. And this was really my introduction to the band, outside of probably hearing songs like Ska Sucks or whatever, like on samplers or something, or friends burn CDs, whatever. This was the first one where I was like, I'm gonna buy this. I don't know where I was getting this money from. This must have been in like a period where I had one job at one point for a few months in high school, but I want to say it was before this even. Like I wasn't working, so I don't know who was buying these CDs for me, but I was loading up at
Your
this
mom
time.
bought you this CD. She loved it.
Yeah, my mom was a huge Propaganda fan. Her favorite song was "Fuck the
The
Border."
song, the song titles are just like, I got to get this for my boy.
Yeah, he's really gonna love this one, isn't he? But no,
This will help him through puberty, so I don't have to deal with it.
I'm curious to look at song titles now and see if there's any that we can apply to puberty, to a boy going through puberty.
Yeah, so
What do we got? No, natural disasters. Yeah.
yeah, okay, there we go.
What else we got? Ladies' Night in Loserville. Perfect.
Yeah, the song titles are pretty sweet on this one.
Yeah,
well,
how about
lots of their albums have.
how about this one for a boy going through puberty? New Homes for Idle Hands.
Oh,
March of the Crabs.
Yeah.
Well, you know. Anyway, this record, this was like one of those bands, because if I recall, it came with like a whole like documentary or something. Like there was just like, it was this band that I was like, okay, there are political bands and then there's Propaganda, right? Like where they are a band that are like, they make you think when listening to their lyrics, and they've got a message in every song, whether that message is, you know, political, social issue, or I don't know specifically, you know, on these records, but I feel like later in their catalog, they you know, even more like he kind of gets a little more introspective with his lyrics, but there's still like some of the best songwriting that is out there, as far as not even just in the punk world, I think, but in just like the music world. Like his lyrics are, it's, I don't even, you know, it's, I get lost thinking about it, and there's a lot of stuff that I won't even pretend to understand
yeah,
on their albums. But then when they mix it, it's funny because, you know, I talking about Strung Out, I was like, I don't really like the metal side of stuff that they introduced there. But for whatever reason, when, you know, Propaganda, especially like this, as far as I understand, this was kind of the record where they started turning and getting a little thrashier. I can get behind it, and I can get behind the technicalities of that music. But yeah, it's such a good record. And I guess for whatever reason, I think I've heard that Chris Hanna does not like the guitar tones on this record, which I'm like, really? Like, and I guess he played it much faster than he should have, which is funny to me. Like he just got in there, was like, we're gonna crank these up to 1,000 and just go. But yeah, no, this was a record. I had this moment where when I was thinking about this list, I was like, okay, I've got a few that I know off the top of my head, like, yes, this is going to be on my list. And I was driving to work one day, and I was probably listening to like one of the other records that's on my list. And all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, Propaganda was on Fat Wreck. Hold up. Like, how could I forget this? But I think part of that was because, you know, like listening to some of their later stuff, they were releasing on different labels, right? Like in this, even in Canada, was released on G7 Welcoming Committee,
Yeah.
which was like their own imprint, I believe, right? Yeah, it was released on the band's own
Right,
G7
yeah, something
Welcoming
like that.
Committee. Yeah. But yeah, it's a great record. But and every now and then I'll text you and being like, today's a Propaganda day.
Yeah,
I just
no,
want
it's
to
awesome.
think. I want my brain to hurt a little bit while I listen to this music.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna be honest. There's I feel like a band like this just kind of went over my head, you
Yeah.
know, especially lyrically or topic wise. Like, um, it was just pretty vastly different from whatever else I was listening to then.
Yeah.
They were also one of those bands. I can't remember who it was on the Victory episode where I said that, you know, I kind of listened to them more when I was with certain friends that were really into them than
Right.
I did myself, just for whatever reason. So my buddy Jess that I've mentioned lots of times,
Yeah.
he was super into them, and so would always listen to them when we were hanging out, um, or you know, at different points, you know, time on tour.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they're bands we were with, and we, you know, ride in each other's vehicles and listen to it. And I mean, they've been around for a long time. I go see them live any chance I can get, which is very few because they don't tour that often,
Yeah.
which is sad because we're only 6 hours down the road from them. But awesome live band. I love seeing them live, and they're probably one of those bands where I take more away from it live. You know, least for me, a bit easier to engage with. So yeah, I don't really know this album a ton. I listened through it last week just to kind of see if I even really knew it. There's a few songs that stood out. Anchorless was one, which did Weaker Thens redo that one, or was it just Propaganda that? So I think it sounds like it's John K. Sampson singing that one, which is the guy that started Weaker Thens. Is that right, or am I mixing?
Yeah, John K. Sampson's in Weaker Thens, but Anchorless isn't on this record, so it could very well be John K. Sampson singing it.
It's what oh, that's on Less Talk, More Rock, maybe.
Maybe I'm looking it up right now, which would have been John K. Sampson.
Yeah, okay, sorry, I'm mixing those up. I kind of listened through.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, Anchorless is on Less Talk.
Okay, but yeah,
so there's a very good chance.
Yeah, so as I skipped through this one or went through it last week, it was kind of like it's cool. I put the songs like, oh yeah, I can remember listening to these, and it doesn't like do a whole lot for me. Lots of really cool riffs and stuff, but overall it's probably a bit much for me, just for whatever reason. But I mean, yeah, they are one of those bands that have been so instrumental for many reasons, and there's a reason why so many bands cite them. So it's cool to have a band on Fat Records that was so influential, that kind of felt almost like a local-ish band. Growing up in Manitoba too, where they were from, it was only 3.5 hours from them. So it was cool, just knowing like, oh, like there's this band, it's not that far away, but they're on this bigger label, and seeing their name on various things. So yeah, lots of little anecdotes with this band, but nothing super personal for me.
So what's your number 2?
Oh, what is my number 2?
I mean, I know what it is.
Oh yeah. So yeah, this is one that's, I kind of went back and forth this one. So it's Face to Face is Protection, which is only 4 and a bit years old.
Yeah.
And so I kind of was like, gosh, I picked such a new release. A lot of these releases I'm talking about, are 15, 20 years old. I've had a lot of time to spend with it. So I kind of went back and forth, but this is one that just has stuck out to me. I mean, I've been listening to Face for years, as we've mentioned. We've done episodes of them talking about their influence. And so why I picked this one is because they kind of fell off a bit for me, for a number of years, and albums where, I still checked it out, but it didn't kind of last for me. And so when they were back on Fat Records for this release, I anticipated it, but kind of with hesitancy, not really knowing, what it was going to be like. I had seen them live was it shortly before this? Maybe it was after. Yeah, it was after that anyways. But yeah, just going through this album, I've gone back to it so many times. They put out the live album that has songs from it, and I don't know, they just really brought it back for me, which made me really excited because I've spent so much time with them, and so to have them kind of back in that place of like, okay, like I always want to go back to this album, it just kind of solidified them as a band. And I was like, okay, that's okay. They don't have, there's a few albums I don't like, but at least their new one I really love. And so I don't know, it just kind of stuck out to me, and so made the list.
This record, I actually debated it being on my list as well, which was funny. But it was actually the Live in a Dive album that really solidified Protection for me, because I was listening to it, man, there's a lot of good songs on this record. And I started realizing that a lot of the good songs that I was listening to, I'm like, dude, these are off Protection. So that I went back to it and fell in love with it. I wouldn't even say fell in love with it, because I feel like when it first came out, because it came out in 2016, is that what you said?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So I want to say it probably wasn't until 2018 or so that like when it first came out, I listened to it and I was like, yeah, okay, it's, sounds like Face to Face, a band that I love, but it, there was nothing that immediately was like, this is what I need to listen to. And then whenever the Punk in Drublic tour was, like when it came up to Edmonton, I went to it, and there was like, they had a table where they were selling like vinyl at discount prices. They were just trying to unload a bunch of it, and in there was Face to Face Protection. And so that's what I ended up buying. There was some other stuff that I was like looking at, and I was like, I should probably just buy one, should be responsible and only buy one record. And so that's what I came home with. And from that point on, like putting it on, I was like, oh, this record is actually so good. And it's so like, it just sounds so good.
Yeah.
It's written really well. And it's definitely one of those records where I'm like, dude, the fact that they're still doing this, however many years after they got going and still doing it this well is mind-boggling. And I think I saw them on that tour that you were mentioning. It was I want to guess it was for this record.
Yeah,
Uh,
that was shortly after.
yeah, and I went and I was a little bit bummed because the crowd was like pretty small in the room, and so I was pumped because they were doing like they had scheduled the Big Choice anniversary tour, which got canceled due to COVID, and I was going to go see that, and I was like, oh, I hope the crowd is like, if I recall, it was at least nearly sold out before things were called off, because it was literally like weeks before that I was supposed to see them that it got canceled. But so that was a bit of a bummer. But yeah, man, Protection is so good, and it makes me just pumped to like to think like that. I think I heard rumors that they might be working on a new record, or
Yeah.
they've already started working on it. And so I'm pumped to hear it, because if Protection is any kind of indication, it's going to be a good record. So
Yeah, I hope so. At the same time, it's like, Protection was such a good album. Even if it's like a little bit behind it, it'll kind of,
sure.
be that kind of fight between, okay, they're back and they're putting out albums, somewhat, well, I guess not that consistency. It's been 5 years. They put out the live album, but
They had the live, and then didn't they did an acoustic album, I feel, too.
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another great release. So,
I just couldn't remember if that was before or after, but yeah, I think they've been kind of going pretty consistently. Like if you think about though, but I mean, at the same point, like I have a hard time, like a live album, like, okay, it's a collection of songs that have already been released. And then same with the acoustic thing, right? Like, so as far as new music's concerned, it's been half a decade almost.
Yeah, for sure.
But which is funny, because my number two, I had said I thought about putting that record on here. My number two was actually released in 1992, so we're going a ways back, and that's Face to Face, Don't Turn Away. This one, maybe this is a bit of a loophole, because it was re-released by Fat Records a year after it was first released on Doctor Strange Records, but when I was thinking about it and I was going through the Fat Wreck Discogs like listing, just to, I was like, am I missing anything? Just kind of like scrolling through it as far as like records I loved. And when I came across this one, I was thinking about it, and I'm like, if I'm gonna pick a Face to Face record, like the new one, like I said, is 5 years old now, or getting there. It's the one I listen to the most these days. But Face to Face was such like a big, important band to me, especially in high school, especially when I was writing, in a punk band sort of thing. Like they were like one of those bands where I was like, man, if I could write like Trevor Keith, that would be incredible. And this record, I actually wouldn't have been introduced to a lot of these songs really until I listened to the Face to Face live record. But because like the one I owned back then was Big Choice. That was the first record that I really got into from Face to Face, which wouldn't come out for another few years after this one. And when I go back to this one, though, it's fun to put it on, because I'm like, oh, I actually like know all these songs, like regardless of never having actually owned this record, when I was a teenager listening to Face to Face and discovering them for the first time. But because a lot of them, would have been on that live record. And then just over time, it's a fun record because the guitar tones are pretty terrible. It's like, it's definitely a first record. But it's just so fun. And I mean, I was watching a show, I think it was like Face to Face on the Warped Tour in like 95 or something like that. That's up on YouTube. You should find it, because like the video quality and audio is actually really good, especially for the time. Like, and it's not like, as far as like it's just a single camera sort of thing, like someone at the back of the club filming, right? But just watching them, it's so much fun. Like it's just done they're still one of my favorite bands. You know, you go see them now, or at least when I saw them on the tour for Protection. And yeah, I mean, they're all older, but they're still like, they get up there and they absolutely destroy their songs in a good way. You know, like they're so good. But so in the end, I debated having Protection, and I was like, we'll just talk about it at the same time. And it's funny that they both ended up being number 2, because as I like wrote this list, it kind of bobbled around a little bit. But no, this is I think, when I think about it, I'm like, this is the record that is really responsible for me loving the band, I suppose, because that live album was really what like sold me on Face to Face, and Big Choice obviously as well. But so anyway, let's get down to it. We're down to our number ones. What is your number 1 record?
So I'm thinking this might even be the first real copy of a Fat album that I got besides a compilation, and that is Good Riddance's Ballads of the Revolution, or From the Revolution. I can't remember what if it's of or from, but
I think it's from. I could look real quick for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Either way, I just call it ballads, but yeah,
as do I.
Yeah, this is just one of those albums that I just remember hearing and just being like taken back by, you know, whether it was kind of the more aggressive parts in it. Like, so there's a few songs on samplers that were on this CD that definitely stood out, and you know, kind of introduced me to you know, to some more political things, to veganism, like some concepts that, or ideas, or ways of living, or lifestyles, whatever you want to call it, you know, that I would have really had no idea about in a small town. And again, not necessarily anything that I super grabbed onto or you know, took as my own lifestyle, but I don't know, there's just something was really intriguing about this album. I loved the mix of aggression and melody. I loved Russ's, or still love Russ's voice, and just his ability to, you know, similar to Rise Against, right, where we can just kind of push it to that scream, but it still has kind of a melodic side to it, and it just added so much to the songs. You know, the songs were fast and quick, but still felt like they had enough depth to them that it wasn't just like thrash from the start to beginning, or start to finish, but it was, you know, enough dynamic to still, you know, feel like a creative album. So yeah, I mean, it's one I still go back to all the time, put it on, and you know, as soon as that first song kicks in, I think that is Fertile Fields the first one, or the first song, I still remember seeing them live for the first time and hearing some of these songs, and I don't know, it's just, again, maybe not necessarily the best Good Riddance record, but it's the one that when I think of Good Riddance, I immediately think of this album, and we'll keep going back to it.
Yeah. No, I think this was actually my first, and I kind of alluded to it at the beginning of the episode, my first actual like Fat album that I owned as well. And yeah, like, you can't argue with how good it is, and everything you said about it is spot on. Which is why my number 1 is not this album. But my number 1, we're going back to 2001, July 10th, 2001. So that was a great year. Good Riddance, Symptoms of a Leveling Spirit. We did an episode about both of these albums. And this was the one that I said was my favorite. And I read a quote from Russ Rankin that said, I think it was the pinnacle. It was definitely the pinnacle for us as far as our career. If you just want to go by numbers, like the year that came out, we were in every weekly. All our shows were bumped up to the bigger rooms. We sold out our whole European tour, and that was about as good as it ever got for us. And that was pretty cool for that to happen. He says, I just have a lot of really good memories about that year personally and band-wise. Everything just went really, really well for us and had a really successful year. And I still think that record, to a lesser extent, the EP that came before it, were where I finally found my stride as a songwriter. And I would have to, again, we discussed this, I would have to agree though, like I find like the songs on this, while I really love Ballads from the Revolution, the songs on this are just in a similar way, I think, to when we were talking about Rise Against, like from the Unraveling to Revolutions Per Minute, like there was just something more going on here.
Yeah.
With songwriting, just more cohesive songs or what have you. And Yeah, like this record takes me places. I don't want to talk too much about it because we've done entire episodes on these records, but
Right.
yeah, like it was a no doubter for me when we started discussing the labels we were going to talk about. I was like, yeah, well, Good Riddance, Symptoms of a Leveling Spirit is easily my number one for Fat Wreck. And when I was making that list, it was the one that never moved. I think every other record on my list was in a different place at some point in time, right? Like, but this one was always number one for me. And yeah, I still love it.
Yeah.
You know, everything about it, really. Like, it's, except for the artwork. Again, another one that the artwork is a little like, you know, it's like it's entirely referencing the first track on the album, but it's not very good artwork. Whereas Ballads, I really like the artwork. Like the whole, I'm assuming it's a soldier in Vietnam. That's what it looks like, or reminds me of anyways, like something you'd see from like a movie from the 60s.
Yeah.
Like some what was the name of that movie? Apocalypse Now sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't know that movie much, but yeah, I just listened to Symptoms last week, and yeah, again, just was like, man, this is such a good album. I mean, I love every Good Riddance album, and but yeah, this is a great pick, and I definitely think they deserve that number one spot. Again, a band that's still going,
Yeah.
still releasing awesome albums. Yeah, so if you need should I give a spoiler alert for next week or no?
Well, I feel like you kind of spoiled it right there. So go ahead.
So next week,
If you need a reason to listen.
yeah, so we'll be talking with Russ from Good Riddance, and diving a bit deeper into ballads and some other things too. So if you're a Good Riddance fan and agree with us that they're number one, Good Riddance is number one. What movie is that? Where maybe just Nacho Libre, where
I don't know.
yeah, Ramses or whatever. Ramses is number one. Anyways.
I don't know if I've ever watched that movie in its entirety.
Oh, come on, man.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites. Anyways, getting late. I'm getting rambly.
There you go.
Alive, so anyways, there's a teaser if you care.
Yeah.
If you want to check out more about Good Riddance.
Of course they care. It's going to be, it's, I can say this. It is a good episode. We're like, you were acting for a moment there, like it's going to happen. I mean, the interview already happened, so it's there. True. Like it's, in fact, when we're recording this, here's a little like peek behind the curtain. It's already uploaded.
Oh wow! If you can hack the system, you can find it a week early.
That's right. But no, that's you are getting rambly, so we'll finish it. Yeah, thanks. This is, again, follow us wherever you are on social media. So are we. Growing Punk Pod, Twitter and Instagram. You'll find us. We're on Facebook too. growingpunkpod.com. You can find our website there. All the episodes are there. And whenever I and Aaron are feeling not lazy, we sometimes write things. It's been a while since I've written anything, but anyway, sometimes we write things. And wherever you're listening to the show, make sure you rate it, review, subscribe, tell your friends. If you got friends who are fans of Good Riddance, tell them that, hey, next week you're going to want to listen because Russ Rankin's going to be on the show. But other than that, that'll do it. So goodbye.
So
I don't know why you always have to be judging me, because I only believe in science.